He leaned back in his chair and laughed loud enough for the room to hear. Not nervous, not confused, amused. "My mom writes the laws," he said, eyes fixed on the bench. "You just quote them." The words didn't echo, they landed. Judge Frank Caprio didn't raise his voice. He didn't bristle. He didn't perform. He simply looked at the young man in front of him and replied calm and precise. "This court enforces them." In that moment, this stopped being a routine traffic case. Just hours earlier, on a quiet Monday morning, a white SUV tore through a school zone at more than double the posted speed limit. Children stood on the corner. A crossing guard was on duty, and a retired school teacher stepped into a marked crosswalk with the legal right of way. She had to step back to survive. Now the driver sat in a courtroom confident, 23 years old, well-dressed, well-connected, certain that this was all a formality, something to be handled with a credit card and a phone call. But Judge Caprio wasn't interested in how fast a fine could be paid. He wanted to understand something far more important. What happens when speed becomes habit? When power is borrowed instead of earned? And when mercy is mistaken for weakness? Because this case wasn't about a number on a speedometer. It was about risk, about intimidation disguised as sarcasm, about whether influence should ever speak louder than accountability. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. If this had been your child in that crosswalk, would nothing happen be enough? If you believe real justice means protecting the vulnerable, not the powerful, consider subscribing. Because what you're about to witness is the difference between mercy that excuses and mercy that transforms. Monday mornings in school zones are supposed to move slowly. Cars idle. Crossing guards step forward. Children weight backpacks hanging loose on small shoulders. At 8:44 a.m., Hope Street didn't feel rushed. It felt ordinary. Then a white SUV broke the rhythm. It came northbound faster than it should have, far faster. The posted limit was 25 miles per hour. The vehicle was moving at 53, more than double, in an active school zone, with crossing guards present. This wasn't a quiet mistake, it was momentum. Henrietta Bishop stepped into the marked crosswalk with the walk signal in her favor. A retired high school teacher. Decades spent guiding teenagers through hallways and life decisions. She did what pedestrians are taught to do. She checked the street and trusted the law to protect her. Then she heard the sound. An engine pushing too hard, a vehicle closing distance too quickly. She looked up and saw the SUV bearing down on her. Instinct took over. She stepped back. The SUV passed within 3 feet of where she had been standing. Close enough that the air moved. Close enough that the moment etched itself into memory. Elementary school children waited on the opposite corner watching the entire thing unfold. They saw an adult do everything right and still almost get hurt. Nothing happened. And everything almost did. Traffic and Patrol Officer Louisa Montero had already noticed the speed. From her vantage point, the violation wasn't subtle. It was dangerous. She initiated a traffic stop at 8:47 a.m. just seconds after the near miss. The driver was Cameron Hollister, 23, on his way to campus. Late for an exam, as he would later explain. When Officer Montero approached the vehicle, she didn't find fear or concern. She found irritation. "This is ridiculous," he said. To Cameron, the situation felt exaggerated. The street had been mostly empty. He had already passed the pedestrian. No contact had been made. No injury recorded. But safety isn't measured by impact. It's measured by margin. Officer Montero explained the violations calmly. Excessive speed in a school zone. Failure to yield to a pedestrian in a marked crosswalk. Reckless driving. Disorderly conduct. She documented what she observed, what she heard, and what could have happened if one step had gone differently. That's when the tone shifted. Cameron took out his phone and photographed her badge. "You don't want my mom involved in your case." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They carried weight on their own. Officer Montero perceived it as intimidation. Not because of volume, but because of meaning. Because the message wasn't about disagreement. It was about consequence. About what might happen to someone who continued doing their job. Cameron would later call it sarcasm, frustration, a bad moment. But sarcasm doesn't slow cars, and frustration doesn't erase danger. By 9:02 a.m., 15 minutes after the stop, a text message was sent from Cameron's phone. "Got ticket. Mom says she'll fix it. NBD. No big deal." 47 minutes later, at 9:34 a.m., a voicemail arrived at the department. The number was registered to the office of Congresswoman Elaine Hollister. The message was controlled, professional, polite. A request for a quiet resolution. By the time Cameron walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, the case already carried a pattern. Speed ignored once before. A remedial course skipped. A school zone treated like a suggestion. And a belief spoken and unspoken that influence could smooth out consequences. Judge Caprio didn't rush past that context, because before a court decides what to do, it has to understand who someone has been when no one was watching. The courtroom didn't feel rushed that morning, but it felt alert. Judge Frank Caprio sat forward as the charges were read aloud, slowly, deliberately, each one landing with its own weight. Reckless driving in a school zone. Failure to yield to a pedestrian in a marked crosswalk. Disorderly conduct. Intimidation via political pressure. Cameron Hollister listened with the patience of someone convinced this would be over quickly. When Judge Caprio asked if he had received the citation at the scene, Cameron answered casually. Yes, he had skimmed it. That was enough in his mind. Judge Caprio paused on that word. Skimmed, because skimming suggests distance. It suggests a belief that details don't matter, that outcomes are negotiable. Cameron's attorney Diane Kern rose carefully from her chair. Her voice was measured, professional, practiced. Your Honor, my client is prepared to resolve this matter efficiently. He has no prior criminal record and is ready to pay all applicable fines today. Judge Caprio didn't look at her right away. This court is not a payment portal, he said quietly. The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. They drew a line. Ms. Kern tried again. She reframed. She softened. She emphasized cooperation, responsibility, moving on. But Judge Caprio wasn't asking for willingness to pay. He was asking for truth. He turned the page in the file and exposed a detail Cameron hadn't expected to matter. A prior citation. Same school zone. Same pattern. 42 miles per hour in a 25 zone. Paid. Closed. Forgotten. Except behavior doesn't forget. This isn't today's offense, the judge said. It's a habit. Cameron shrugged. He had been late for class. He paid the fine. It was handled. Handled felt like a door slammed shut. But nothing had changed behind it. Judge Caprio leaned in. Walk me through Monday morning. Cameron exhaled audibly. The sigh wasn't subtle. It carried irritation. He explained he was late for an exam. The light was yellow. He went through it. A woman stepped into the crosswalk after he was already past her. The officer made a big deal out of nothing. Judge Caprio didn't interrupt. He waited. Then he corrected him. You were traveling 53 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour school zone. Cameron pushed back. The street was mostly empty. Mostly doesn't mean safe, the judge replied. He read from the pedestrian's written statement. One line, plain, unemotional. I was one step away from a wheelchair. Cameron waved it off. Dramatic. Nothing happened. That's when Judge Caprio shifted. Harm isn't just impact, he said, it's risk. He turned to Officer Louisa Montero and asked her to read her narrative into the record. She stood straight, calm, clear, trained. She described observing the speed, the crosswalk, the pedestrian stepping back to avoid collision, the traffic stop, and then the sentence that changed the temperature in the room. You don't want my mom involved in your case. Judge Caprio asked how she perceived that statement. As intimidation, Your Honor. Cameron leaned forward. It was sarcasm, frustration, a taunt. Let's listen, the judge said. The body cam audio filled the room. Static first, then Cameron's voice sharp, clipped, unmistakable. You don't want my mom on your case. Silence followed. Judge Caprio let it sit. Then he asked a simple question. Your mother is Congresswoman Elaine Hollister, correct? Yes. And when you made that statement, did you mean her role as a congresswoman? Cameron hesitated, then answered. He was being sarcastic. Officer Montero was asked again what she thought in that moment. I took it as a threat, she said. Like there would be consequences for me doing my job. Judge Caprio nodded. Sarcasm doesn't stop cars, he said. And it doesn't undo fear. He turned to the clerk. Were there any contacts to this court or the department before today's hearing? The clerk checked the log. Yes. One voicemail. From a number registered to the office of Congresswoman Elaine Hollister. Time-stamped 47 minutes after the citation. The voicemail was played. Controlled, polite, professional. A request for a quiet resolution. Cameron shifted in his seat. He hadn't asked anyone to call. Maybe not. But someone believed it would help. And in that courtroom, the belief mattered. Because the case was no longer just about speed. It was about whether influence had tried to step in where accountability belonged. The courtroom had grown still. Not the restless kind of silence that comes from boredom, but the kind that settles when truth is about to speak for itself. Judge Frank Caprio turned slightly toward the clerk. Is Ms. Henrietta Bishop available to give a brief statement? She was, by phone. The speaker clicked on and a woman's voice filled the room. Calm, measured, unshaken. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm a retired high school teacher. No drama, no anger, just facts. She described Hope Street that morning. The walk signal, the crosswalk she had used countless times before, the sound of a vehicle approaching too fast to feel right. How she looked up and realized the car wasn't slowing. I stepped back, she said. If I hadn't, I would have been hit. Elementary school children had been waiting on the opposite corner. They saw everything. They saw an adult do what the rules told her to do and still have to retreat to stay alive. 1 second of speed, she said, can cost a lifetime of mobility. Cameron muttered something under his breath. Judge Caprio caught it. If you have something to say, Mr. Hollister, he said evenly, say it clearly. Cameron looked up. She should have waited. The judge didn't raise his voice. She had the right of way. You didn't. There's no gray area here. Ms. Bishop continued. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for leniency or severity. She asked for accountability. That school zone exists to protect children, she said. Speed limits aren't suggestions. The line went quiet. Judge Caprio let the silence breathe. Then he turned back to the record. A text message screenshot had been submitted by the prosecution. The clerk read it aloud. From Cameron Hollister, timestamp 9:02 a.m., Monday. Got ticket. Mom says she'll fix it. NBD. Cameron's jaw tightened. That was private. It was discoverable, the judge replied. He laid out the timeline carefully, almost gently, as if assembling something fragile. The traffic stop, the text message, the voicemail from the congressional office. Someone moved fast, Judge Caprio said. Cameron said he hadn't asked anyone to call. Maybe not, the judge replied, but you expected it. That expectation, quiet, casual, confident, hung heavier than any accusation. Diane Kern stood again, slower now. She requested the remainder of the hearing be handled in chambers. Less exposure, less attention, less damage. Sunlight is due process, Judge Caprio said. We're staying on the record. Then he turned to Cameron. I'm going to ask you 3 yes or no questions. The room leaned in. Were you driving 52 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour school zone? Yes. Did you fail to yield to a pedestrian who had the right of way in a marked crosswalk? Cameron tried to explain. He didn't hit her. That's not a no, the judge said. Did you fail to yield? Yes. Did you invoke your mother's position as a congresswoman during the stop? Cameron hesitated. I commented. That's not a no. Yes. Cameron's voice hardened. This feels like I'm being targeted because of who my mom is. Judge Caprio didn't bristle. You're not targeted, he said. You're noticed. Most people don't drive double the speed limit in a school zone. Most people don't nearly hit a pedestrian in a crosswalk. Most people don't invoke a congresswoman's name during a traffic stop. Most people don't have a family office call the court an hour later. That's not targeting, the judge said. That's consequence. The room was quiet again. Then the door opened. A woman in a dark suit entered mid-50s, composed, familiar with microphones and podiums. Congresswoman Elaine Hollister. She asked for a moment. Judge Caprio didn't stand. This is an active hearing, he said. You're welcome to observe. I won't discuss the case off the record. She spoke of quiet resolutions, of everyone's benefit. Quiet resolutions, the judge said, are how patterns continue. Before she could respond, Cameron spoke. Mom, stop, he said. This is my case, not yours. She turned toward him, surprised. Judge Caprio's gaze sharpened. Step back, he said. Let him use his voice. The congresswoman hesitated, then nodded, and moved to the back row. For the first time since Monday morning, Cameron sat alone with what he had done. And the court was finally ready to decide what to do with that truth. Judge Frank Caprio didn't rush the moment. He let the room sit with everything it had just heard, the speed, the risk, the borrowed power, the quiet attempts to smooth things over. Then he spoke not as someone delivering punishment, but as someone setting a boundary. This court does not weigh cases based on titles, connections, or family position, he said. Conduct is the only currency here. He reviewed the evidence methodically. Officer Louisa Montero's narrative, the body cam audio, the time-stamped crosswalk footage, the statement from Henrietta Bishop. Each piece stood on its own. Together they told a single story. Cameron Hollister drove recklessly at more than double the speed limit in an active school zone. He failed to yield to a pedestrian with the legal right of way, creating imminent danger. He directed contemptuous language at an officer performing her duty, and he invoked his mother's political position in a way that was reasonably perceived as intimidation. Judge Caprio paused. Influence doesn't amend reality, he said, and it doesn't erase harm. He noted the prior warning from the same school zone the year before. The fine had been paid, the remedial course ignored, the behavior unchanged. That warning was instructional, he said. This ruling is educational. The base fines were read clearly without flourish. reckless driving in a school zone, failure to yield, disorderly conduct, intimidation via political leverage. The total came to $850. Cameron exhaled sharply. Judge Caprio raised a hand. I'm not finished. He explained that a portion of the fine, $350, would be stayed. Not waived. Stayed. Contingent on full and timely completion of what he called a restorative accountability plan. Mercy, Judge Caprio said, isn't a discount. It's a contract. The plan was detailed, specific, unavoidable. A written apology to Henrietta Bishop. Not a form letter. A real one. One that named the conduct and the lesson learned. Delivered in person if she agreed. 60 hours of community service with the Providence School Safety Program. Working directly with crossing guards. Coordinating schedules. Standing where children stand and learning what it feels like to be exposed to traffic moving too fast. Participation in 3 driver education seminars focused on school zone safety. A 60-second public service announcement on pedestrian safety. Script vetted by the court. No mention of family, no softening, just responsibility. A driver reflection course on the physics of speed and the consequences of reaction time. And finally, a 700-word written reflection on what he learned submitted to the court, read and evaluated. Judge Caprio set his pen down. This isn't about humiliation, he said. It's about change. He added recommendations to the record. Not orders, but signals. A public log of off-record contact attempts. Clear protocols when elected offices reach out. A citywide pedestrian safety enforcement matrix. A hotline for reporting influence attempts. Education modules for high school students. The message was clear. This case wasn't ending with a sentence. It was expanding into a standard. Cameron sat still. No laughter, no leaning back, just listening. Judge Caprio looked at him one last time. If we don't make this clear now, he said quietly, next time it could be a child in that crosswalk who doesn't move fast enough. The room remained silent. Justice had been spoken. Now it would have to be lived.